David Carter had been profiled before, but never like this. All he wanted was to get home after a long day, but in an instant, flashing lights painted him guilty before he even spoke a word, and as the officer's hand hovered over his gun, ready to strip him of his dignity, no one in that dark street knew the truth. The quiet black man, being treated like a criminal, was actually one of the most powerful protectors in the nation. A Secret Service agent. The cruiser door slammed shut. Officer Daniels strutted toward David like a man already convinced of guilt. His flashlight beam cut through the night, landing on David's face with the sharpness of accusation. "You think you can just stand here? Hands where I can see them," Daniels barked. David's pulse quickened, but his posture never broke. Tall, composed, dressed in a suit that still carried the weight of an earlier assignment. He was every bit the professional he had been trained to be. But Daniels didn't see professionalism. He didn't see discipline. He only saw color. "Don't give me that smug look," Daniels sneered, his hand grazing the grip of his weapon. "You fit the description. Step away from the vehicle." David's voice was calm, respectful, steady. "Officer, I believe you've made a mistake." Daniels laughed coldly. "Mistake? No, you made the mistake. Walking around here like you own the place. This car isn't yours, is it? Tell me who you stole it from." Neighbors peeked through half-drawn curtains. Phones began recording. The air was thick with tension, every breath heavy with the possibility of disaster. David raised his hands, his voice soft. "I'll cooperate." But Daniels wasn't listening. His flashlight hovered like a weapon, his words dripping with arrogance. "Turn around." Hands on the hood. "Don't make me repeat myself." David obeyed. The cool metal of his SUV pressed against his palms. Behind him, the smug sound of handcuffs clicking open filled the silence. "Another thug off the street," Daniels muttered under his breath. But then, everything changed. As Daniels patted him down, his hand brushed against something clipped securely inside David's jacket. He yanked it free, expecting car keys or maybe stolen property. Instead, the light glinted off a gold badge, the unmistakable seal of the United States Secret Service. Daniels froze. His cocky grin collapsed. His mouth went dry as his trembling fingers traced the badge. David turned his head, his eyes sharp, his voice cutting through the night like steel. "That is federal authority, the same authority that puts me within arm's reach of the president. Now tell me, officer, do I still fit your description?" The silence was deafening. Daniels stumbled backward, his arrogance disintegrating into panic. I didn't what?" David snapped, stepping toward him now. No longer the passive figure he had been moments ago. "Didn't see the suit? Didn't hear the respect I gave you? Or didn't care? Because you saw my skin before you saw the man?" The neighbors who had been whispering were no longer quiet. Phones zoomed closer. Every second of this humiliation was being captured. Daniel's face grew pale as the reality of his actions sank in. David leaned closer, his voice low, dangerous. "You put your hands on a federal agent. Do you have any idea what that means for you?" Daniel swallowed hard. His hand twitched uselessly near his holster, but his authority was gone. He wasn't the predator anymore, he was prey. David reclaimed his badge, slid it back into his jacket, and straightened his tie. "You're lucky I'm not the one making arrests tonight. But trust me, this isn't over." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Daniel staggered backward, his confidence shattered. He muttered something into his radio before retreating toward his cruiser, his figure shrinking under the weight of every camera lens. David opened his SUV door, ready to leave this humiliation behind. But just then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. An encrypted call from headquarters. He answered. The voice on the other end was urgent. "Agent Carter, your cover may already be blown. Report to headquarters immediately. Do not engage with local law enforcement." David's eyes flicked toward Daniels, who was now frantically whispering into his radio. A chill ran through him. That stop hadn't been random. Someone wanted him exposed. He slid into the driver's seat, the engine roaring to life. But his thoughts raced faster than the car. What if Daniels wasn't just acting on prejudice? What if this was a setup? As he drove into the night, one thought consumed him. Someone powerful wanted Agent Carter silenced, and they had just fired their first shot. The next morning, David walked into headquarters, briefing in hand. His superior's expression was grave. "We intercepted chatter last night," the director said. The officer who stopped you wasn't working alone. There's corruption running deep in that precinct. They're tied to organized crime, and now they know you're here." David clenched his jaw. The memory of Daniels's trembling face replayed in his mind. Racism had sparked the confrontation. But corruption? That meant war. And if Daniels' precinct was compromised, that meant every move David made was being watched. That night, as he sat alone in his apartment, a brick crashed through his window. Attached was a note in jagged red letters: "Leave town, or you won't leave alive." David picked up the note, his grip steady. He wasn't afraid, but he knew one thing for certain. This was no longer about prejudice alone. It was about survival. And tomorrow, when he returned to the courthouse for an undercover assignment, he would face the last man he ever expected to see on the bench, Judge Harrison, the same judge who had once mocked another young black man in open court. And this time, the stakes weren't just about justice. They were about life and death. The courthouse was buzzing with chatter, reporters gathering outside, as if they sensed something monumental was about to happen. David Carter adjusted his tie as he stepped out of his SUV. On the surface, he looked calm, but inside he was a storm. He wasn't just here as an agent. He was here as a man who had tasted humiliation and was about to serve justice in return. Inside, Judge Harrison sat tall on the bench, his gavel resting like a weapon of authority. He was the kind of man who didn't just command silence, he demanded submission. Years of unchecked power had carved arrogance into his face, and today the case before him would unknowingly pit him against a man he had no idea could end his career with a single revelation. "Court is now in session," Harrison barked, his voice echoing through the chamber. David entered quietly, flashing his badge only to those who needed to see it. To everyone else, he was just another sharply dressed man in the gallery. But beneath the tailored suit was a storm building, a storm that would break before the gavel could fall. The prosecutor began presenting evidence of police misconduct tied to Officer Daniels and several members of the precinct. Daniels himself sat at the defense table, his face pale, sweat beading his forehead. He avoided David's gaze, but his shame was written all over him. Judge Harrison leaned back, smirking. "We've heard allegations like this before," he said dismissively. "But I'll need something more substantial than rumors and emotional testimony." The irony was thick. Here was a judge who had mocked countless young black men, silencing them before their voices could be heard, now sitting over a case where the truth was about to strip him of the very arrogance he wielded like a weapon. David rose from his seat. "Your Honor, if I may." Harrison's eyes narrowed. "And you are?" David stepped forward, pulling a folder from his briefcase. "Special Agent David Carter, United States Secret Service." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Phones clicked on. Reporters leaned forward. Daniel's face drained of color. Harrison stiffened. "Secret Service?" he repeated, his voice trembling for the first time. David's voice was calm but sharp as glass. "Yes, Your Honor. And I have in my possession intercepted communications, witness testimony and video evidence tying Officer Daniels and members of this precinct to organized crime, protection rackets, drug movements, even falsified arrests to cover their tracks." He placed the folder on the judge's bench with deliberate precision. "This is not a rumor. This is fact." Harrison's hand trembled as it brushed the folder. He hadn't expected this. "Not here, not today." David's voice grew colder. "And last night, Officer Daniels tried to humiliate me, not because of my actions, not because of suspicion, but because of the color of my skin. He laid hands on a federal agent, Your Honor, and the cameras caught every second." Gasps filled the room. Daniels buried his face in his hands. David didn't stop. "This isn't just about one bad cop. This is about a system that thinks power means you can strip dignity from another human being. This is about corruption hiding under the mask of law." Harrison's arrogance faltered. He could feel the cameras on him, the public watching not just the case but his every reaction. His dismissive smirk was gone. And in that silence, justice shifted. The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, in light of Agent Carter's testimony and the evidence presented, we move to have Daniels and his accomplices immediately remanded to federal custody." Harrison hesitated, the gavel heavy in his hand. But the weight of the truth pressed harder. With every eye on him, every camera recording, he had no choice. "So ordered," he muttered, his voice barely audible. The gavel struck, but this time it didn't sound like authority. It sounded like defeat. Federal agents swarmed in, cuffing Daniels and 2 other officers on the spot. The crowd erupted, cheers mixing with outrage. Justice had not only been served, it had been witnessed. David remained still, his expression calm, but inside he felt the storm ease. This wasn't just victory. It was vindication. As Daniels was dragged past him, their eyes met. This time there was no arrogance in the officer's gaze, only shame. David turned, addressing the courtroom, his voice resonating like a truth long overdue. Power without respect is corruption, but respect without power is weakness. True justice only lives where both stand together. Remember this, not all battles are fought with fists. Some are fought with truth. The courtroom erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. The moment was etched into history. David Carter walked out of that courthouse not just as a Secret Service agent, but as a symbol of what happens when the underestimated rise and when truth finally cuts through the noise of arrogance. Justice had spoken. Life lesson. Power without respect is corruption. Respect without power is weakness. But when the two stand together in truth, that's when justice is born. If you were in David's shoes, would you have revealed your badge the moment the officer stopped you, or waited for him to expose his arrogance first? Comment your answer below and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that matter.